Hi everybody, we're Group 5 and I'm Julia and I worked with Kara and Bill, and we got to talk a little bit about the experience economy. So today when we're talking about the experience economy, we're going to explain to you all about what that means and all the many aspects of it. But I wanted to start off by talking about what is the experience economy. Economics have typically lumped experiences in with services, but experiences are a distinct economic offering, just as different as services are from goods. And so, as we have progressed throughout time, we began by selling and categorizing commodities, and then we moved to goods. Next, we moved to services, and now we're entering this new economy called the experience economy.
So experiences are more personal than commodities, goods, or services, and they kind of sell themselves. So the way to get people to buy an experience is to appeal to the emotional, physical, intellectual, or spiritual level of that person.
So in talking about different companies that are trying to enter this experience economy, as I'm reading this a few days ago, like last week, in my mind I was like, this sounds just like Disney. Like the whole idea about selling an experience is the idea that you're engaging your customers' emotions, like their physical beings, their intellectual like capacity, and their spiritual level. So like you're trying to get all of these different things. You're trying to evoke emotion like through the experience that you're providing. And so again, like I've shared in a lot of my posts, I currently work for the Walt Disney Company in the theme parks. And that's the whole concept of what we're doing is we're trying to sell this experience. So as I'm reading this, I'm like, this is exactly like the field I'm currently in. And later in the article, Pine and Gilmore are two authors for the article, coin Walt Disney as a pioneer leading the way for the experience economy. So essentially he was the creator of this concept. And so a lot of companies are trying to get into what is known as the experience economy. So both Pine and Gilmore define the success of future companies as taking their competitive edge to the next level in staging experiences, and that businesses must be deliberate in designing engaging experiences that command a fee. Because if you're not paying to experience anything, no one's making a profit.
Yeah, so as we continue to talk about the experience economy, like I mentioned in the beginning, we talk about where this idea came from. And so it came from the idea of first people sold commodities. So like we were talking before, they sold the recipes for you to bake a cake, or they sold the lumber for you to build the furniture. Moving forward from that, people then started to make goods. So instead of buying the lumber to make your furniture, you were able to buy the furniture in and of itself. After that kind of stage in our economy, we moved on to delivering services. And so whether that was someone coming and just installing the furniture in your home, or like we'll talk about later, IBM, like their service was to equip and to find the problems within your software. People began to sell the services for what they provided instead of just the commodities and the goods. And now we're getting into this field where we're selling experiences. And as we're selling experiences, it's not just the furniture, it's not just the birthday cake or whatever it is that customers are looking to buy, but it's this whole atmosphere that people walk into and they experience and they discover. So a big part of that is staging experiences that sell. So you want to create something entirely new where the experience is actually more valuable than the service. And like Kara mentioned, Walt Disney is a great example of that on many levels, and as are other different organizations and companies. So experiences are memorable and commodities are not. So when you go to Disney, or when you're working with a certain company, you want to go and you want to remember everything that you experienced and that you were a part of, the senses, the smells, the thoughts, and the feelings, and not just the fact that you walk away with a good. A great example of this is the British Airlines as well. They talked about not just being someone who flies somewhere from point A to point B, which would be the good or the service, but having the entire experience, getting onto the flight, being served, relaxing, getting able to sleep, all part of the experience, so that customers would actually want to buy that as opposed to just the flight from point A to point B.
Yeah, so in my strategic assessment for last week that was due, I pulled a quote that I found from Walt Disney where he said, someone asked him in an interview about the concept behind Disney World. And he said this quote in an interview in 1963. So this is roughly 7 years after the opening of Disneyland and about 8 years before the opening of Disney World here in Orlando, Florida. And he says, the idea came about when my daughters were very young. Saturdays were always Daddy's day with the two daughters. So we'd start out and we'd try and go somewhere. I'd take them to a merry-go-round in different places. And as I'd sit there on a bench, you know, eating peanuts while they rode the merry-go-round and they did all these things, I felt that there should be some kind of amusement enterprise built where parents and their children could have fun together. So that's where Disneyland started. And so as a cast member of the Walt Disney Company, so cast member is what they call anyone who works for the company. So I'm a cast member because I play a role in the show, and I am a part of the experience that guests have when they come to Walt Disney World. And so every cast member goes through this class called Traditions. And at Traditions, you go and you're told, essentially, you read that quote, you're just told kind of the vision behind Disney World. Because the reality is the Walt Disney Company started way before Disney World or Disneyland ever existed. Walt started his entire enterprise, his entertainment enterprise, as a cartoon artist. And then that vision grew into something else, into this idea of how can we sell this experience of people being together. And so one of our taglines that we're told often as a cast member is that we create happiness and that we are selling memories. And so when families come to us, we are trying to do this for them. So we do that through interactive experiences. And so an interactive experience is a location, it's a ride, it's a food and beverage location, wherever. So like I worked in a restaurant called Casey's Corner, and at Casey's Corner, when you walk in, you smell sauerkraut. You, like, all five senses are engaged. So you smell your sauerkraut, you look around and you see this old time baseball field. It's the turn of the century 1900s. There's a scoreboard on the wall, and then you hear cast members like myself yelling, batter up, like batter number 15, and that's the number that we're calling for food. And I'm trying to think, what are the other senses? Sight, smell, hear, touch. You can, again, you're touching your food, I guess. But again, and there's music playing. And so again, all of these senses are being engaged and you're experiencing something that you forget where you are. You forget that you aren't in the 1900s, or you forget that you're not a pirate in the Caribbean, or you forget that you're not friends with Cinderella and sitting at her royal table, like in her castle, you know. And so again, this whole idea of the experience economy comes from this idea of engaging all five senses.
So one of the nice things about the experience economy is that it also applies to all different business types. What about the theme parks and then restaurants inside of the theme park? It also applies to just restaurants, you know, that are like in shopping malls or just really anywhere. So the point is to make the customer feel like they're in a unique place and they're having, they're having an experience that they wouldn't have if they went to a competitor's restaurant. Examples that were given in the article we read was like the Hard Rock Cafe, Planet Hollywood, House of Blues, places that when you go in there, you really get all of your senses engaged and you're going to have a memorable time that you're willing to pay more money for because it's different. And then in addition to restaurants, there's also stores that will have a theme. One that I can think of is like if I go for a haircut, there's different places you can get a haircut where it's set up with like sports TVs or a basketball floor, like all that stuff to tie in is what makes the experience and makes you pay a little bit more. And it also gives a company that edge. So another example would be Nike Town, Cabela's, and it's really when you're trying to decide, okay, where do I want to go shopping? And that I made good memories the last time, I went to Cabela's because of a unique experience. So that's what keeps customers coming back then.
Right. And so as Bill mentioned, this experience economy works for customers, but it not only works for customers, it also works from business to business. So a great example of this is the Geek Squad, which is a computer installation and repair company out of Minneapolis. And they work to service obviously other people's computers and repair them, but they do it in such a way that they create an experience around this service. So they have special agent costumes themselves, and they wear white shirts with thin black ties and pocket protectors, and they carry badges, and the special agents go as far as to drive old cars and turn a humdrum activity into a memorable encounter. So not only is just some guy coming to fix your computer, but you get this whole experience of the Geek Squad and what they're doing and what they're wearing, what they're driving, and that turns into something more memorable than just a simple service-to-service or business-to-business exchange. Another example of this is the Silicon Graphics. Silicon Graphics opened its Visionarium Reality Center at their corporate headquarters in Mountain View, California. And so this Visionarium Reality Center brought customers and engineers together in an environment where they could interact in real time with three-dimensional project visualization. So not only are companies using this to attract customers, but businesses are using this to attract income and more business to their company. So whether that be something like the Geek Squad where they're creating just something a little slightly more memorable, or the Silicon Valley where they're drawing people in to experience something they can't get anywhere else, both ways can be successful when we're talking about this experience economy.
Yeah, so another thing to think about is as a customer or as a guest or even a business looking to partner with another business for whatever service or good that they're providing, the question that I'm going to ask and the question that we all ask is like, what am I paying for? And the reality is most of these companies are still charging for their goods and services. It's not like just because people are paying for the experience, they're not like buying a hot dog, because the reality is at Disney World, you're paying X amount of dollars to come spend a day in our parks before you even buy a meal, or before you buy merchandise, before you spend money to buy the picture that your family took in front of the castle, things like that. So again, a lot of these companies are still charging an admission fee. So an event is created just to increase customer preference for the commoditized goods or services that a company actually sells, is not just the economic offering. And in the article, it talks about what would a company do differently if they were to charge admission. So there's a movie theater complex in Southfield, Michigan, which is close to where I'm from, but the owner, Jim Lokes, he told Forbes magazine that his whole vision for his movie theater, that it should be worth the price of the movie just to walk into the theater. So again, you're creating this kind of environment that makes people want to come back. Nike Town, again, for example, like in my mind, I close my eyes and I know exactly what Nike Town looks like. There's a wall of gloves, or there's a wall of shoes, or there's pictures of these athletes that I've seen on television or in the Olympics that are larger than life. And when you feel like, when you're in Nike Town, you feel like you can do anything. Like, I haven't run in weeks. Like, I walk into Nike Town and I'm like so motivated to like buy all of their clothes and to start running and to work out, and not like experience dwindles. Like, it goes away as soon as I leave the store, but I know what to expect when I walk in. And again, just this idea of you're kind of paying a cover fee, whether you're at a concert, like you pay for the concert, but like you're not talking to the people that are performing. You're experiencing what they have to offer, or going to see a show. Same thing, like you're paying for the show, but you're not engaged. You're not talking with them. They're not giving you anything other than a program. So again, just this reality of like a cover fee, an admission charge, a ticket price, like those things don't mean that the services or the goods automatically go away, because it's a separate expense, essentially.
So we can characterize experiences by levels of customer participation. So on one end of the spectrum, participation, where the customers can, witness the experience, but they're not really part of it. So let's say like customer goes to a concert, they can watch the performance, but they're not really adding to the experience much. And then on the other end of the spectrum would be active participation. And that's where you're going to have the customers themselves are actually experience, and it's actually a better experience because the customers play a key role. So one example of that would be like a ski resort with people skiing. Another way we can characterize is the connection, which would be like the environment relationship. And I think that's really just how the customer relates to the experience.
So in the article, Pine and Gilmore are two authors. They break experience down into 4 realms, and those 4 realms are entertainment, educational events, escapist experiences, and aesthetic. And they argue kind of that any company that's attempting to create an experience is going to fall into one of those 4 categories. So again, like entertainment, you're going to see a show. An educational event, you're going to the museum. An escapist experience, you're making your coffee shop look great so that people can sit and do homework and get it done really quickly. Or aesthetic, you're just like creating something beautiful. Where again, and I understand that this is a large part of my experience, but the reality is the Walt Disney Company does this so well because they're engaging all 4 realms. In the same way that they're engaging all 5 senses, they're engaging all 4 experiences, realms of experience. So one example is Test Track is a ride at Epcot. And Test Track is essentially you walk in and you are one of the workers at the auto factory, and you are designing, creating, and testing the car that you created. So the educational event here is you're learning about cars. They give you, while you're waiting to ride the ride, you're looking at this screen and you get to create your own car. And so it's educational in that Chevy is the one who sponsors this. So they're kind of teaching you like the different ways that if you give, depending on the way you build your engine or build like the shape of the car or whatever, like it's gonna run differently and things like that. So it's educational in that way. It's entertaining, obviously, because if it wasn't, no one would do it. No one will want to ride. And it's this escapist experience where I'm not a auto manufacturer, but when I'm there, I think I am, and I feel like I am. And again, the aesthetic is very pleasing. As soon as you walk off the ride, you walk into this area where there are cars that no one can afford that Chevy has released at the Detroit Auto Show, and they've since brought them down to Orlando for people to see. So again, it's interacting your experiences with your environment.
Yeah. And so just like there are 4 realms of an experience, there are also 5 steps to designing a memorable experience. And like we've talked about, these kind of make sense and seem like pretty common sense when you're going about it, but we want to just talk through each one real quick. So the first step to designing a memorable experience is to theme the experience. So whether it's Walt Disney or the Rainforest Cafe or whatever we've been talking about in this regard, you need to make sure that you have a theme and you stick with your theme. The second step to designing a memorable experience is to harmonize impressions with positive cues. So at Rainforest Cafe, they make sure that everything fits this theme and that they have these positive cues that go throughout. So as they're walking in, you may feel the mist coming from the trees, or you may hear a sound of a snake slithering by you, or different things like that, which are all small examples of positive cues as you're going about throughout your experience. The third step to design a memorable experience is to eliminate the negative cues, and that kind of makes sense as we're talking. So whether that be a trash can that says thank you. That is a very common thing that we see all over the place, but at the Rainforest Cafe, that doesn't quite fit. So maybe at the Rainforest Cafe, the trash can is a talking, I don't know, talking bird that's telling you thank you so much for eating and to dispose of your leftovers here so that it can eat its meal along with everybody else. So you just want to take away those small things that would distract people from the theme and from the memorable experience at hand. The fourth step to designing a memorable experience is to mix in memorabilia. So this is anything that you can take with you or anything that you can buy, but you want to give people something to take with them so that they can bring this experience home with them. I think at Walt Disney, that's really easy. Maybe they're just taking home a stuffed a stuffed animal of Mickey Mouse or different things like that, but you want to mix in things that people can pull with them to remind them of the experience that they've just had. And then the fifth step to designing a memorable experience is to engage all five senses. And so we talked a little bit about this with the mist, but Disney calls this an immersive experience. So you want to spray scents throughout areas of the park. So when you walk here, you smell this, and when you walk over there, you smell something entirely differently that you know that you've entered and left a certain area. You want to make sure that you're decorating a certain way so you're visually pleasing and that you're using specific jargon. So just like the example Kara gave about Casey's Corner, they speak like number 15 or batter up so that you know where you are and it all makes sense as you're going throughout this experience, which just makes it all the more memorable in the end.
Yeah, so to wrap up this this topic of experience economy, you could argue that if a business isn't looking at doing this, there could be additional revenue that they could be receiving that they're not. So it's something that, as far as like a strategy plan, I think all businesses should look at and see if there's some additional profit that they could make by doing this. But obviously, it has to be a successful experience or a positive experience in order to be a success. So by doing this, it's a growing economical offering, and if they do it right, they're really going to set themselves apart from their competition.
Yeah, and again, to conclude, one thing that people entering the experience economy or the experience market, if you will, need to understand is that if we are not refreshing and renewing our experiences, people are going to get bored. The Rainforest Cafe is the same today as it was 15 years ago, and they're still successful, but there is less of a draw to go there nowadays because people know what to expect. And so whether that's a music artist changing up their style or the way that they hold a concert, or at Disney World, we're building a whole new area of our parks that is dedicated to Star Wars. And Star Wars wasn't even a Walt Disney affiliate until the last few years. And so again, just like keeping things renewed and refreshed. And again, to point back to the idea of Disney, when asked about how Disney World will continue to look in the near future, Walt Disney said, Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world. And in my opinion, this is a concept that everyone entering the experience economy should have, because if you're not innovative, if you're not creative or trying to move forward, the reality is like it will not survive. And we say that in a lot of different things. So we really enjoyed this topic. It was a lot of fun to read about, and again, for me, it was kind of personal. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know.